Sonia Shockley Show. Turn your bitter into better. Into better. It's the Sonia Shockley Show. It's the Sonia Shockley Show. Turn your bitter into better. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sonia Shockley Show. I am super excited about today and so happy to have with me my special guest, a Proverbs 31 woman. She's a woman who's a great resource. She's the woman to go to if ever you have any questions or problems about anything. She's the how-to chick. Naomi Claxton is here today, and she's here to help us talk about burnout, grief, and recovery, because yes, there is recovery after burnout. Naomi, welcome to the show. How are you today, my sister?
I am so blessed, and I thank you so much for having me. It is a dreary Sunday here in Washington, D.C., so you are a breath of beautiful sunshine.
Well, hallelujah for that. So, if you can give our listeners a brief introduction of who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. My name is Naomi. I am a wife, a mother of boys, a godmother, a dog mom, an attorney, and I've been a life coach for a few years because I believe that for so many of us, we're not operating within our gift. And, I believe that we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And sometimes we're trying to do the wrong things. So my forum, The How To Chick, is basically geared towards giving people helpful life advice, but also helping people realize how to focus on what really matters for them.
I love that. And definitely after this pandemic, I feel like 2020, it was just divine inspiration for him to choose 2020, because you think about 2020 vision and being able to now just see things clearly. It's like I can see it clearly now, Lord. So many people have a fresh perspective after 2020. We really now say, what matters to me? What's most important to me? And that's where people want to focus. People want to have more joy.
Yes.
They're like, hey, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to stop sweating the small stuff. I just want more joy. I want to be released from past regrets and anxiety and just really experience the abundant life that God has called us to.
Yes.
And so we're talking about burnout today. And there's so many directions we can go with burnout. It's such a huge topic. But if you could just kind of give us a simple definition of what is burnout?
That's the funny thing about burnout. It looks different to everybody. It manifests differently for everyone.
Right.
And I love the coalescence of grief and burnout, because grief burnout looks like the type of burnout that we expect to see. It looks like someone who can't move, can't get out of bed, can't function. But for so many of us during 2020, we didn't have a choice. We had our kids home. We were caring for elderly parents or grandparents. We were running around hither, thither, and yon, trying to keep our jobs so we could keep a roof over our head. So you didn't have a choice but to keep going. And for so many people, they hit a wall and they didn't understand that it wasn't just burnout, it was also grief. So for me, burnout means that point in your spirit where you're no longer able to look, feel, and experience life as yourself. Because, it can happen at different phases. It can happen due to a loss. And I think I shared with you tonight is the anniversary of my younger brother's death. And it was last year this time. And obviously he was young. So it took a lot of us by surprise, and coming as it did in the middle of well, the pandemic had really just kicked up in a lot of places, but I had been home for a few months with my kids and was so overwhelmed and already struggling that I don't think I processed it. You
Mm.
know, you just go through the motions, right? You gotta contact people, you have to plan the funeral, deal with the COVID restrictions, memorial, dealing with family and friends, and I am I'm a sharer, but I'm very private about my emotions. And so for a lot of that, I found myself in positions where I wasn't able to articulate how that made me feel. And I didn't know that holding on to those feelings was causing burnout. And it was a burnout separate from the burnout that I was getting from caregiving. It was a burnout that was totally different than the burnout that I was getting from feeling overlooked and undervalued at work and feeling like I wasn't capable, right, of doing this big job from home as a parent. Totally different type of burnout. And that's why I say burnout looks different for everyone. And I think looking at 2020, there is a word that almost everyone uses when we think about this time. In our generations, it's unprecedented. No one has ever been through anything like this. You know, the greatest generation had the war, you know, and there were so many things that happened in other generations. But for us, there have been pockets, you know, there hasn't been a worldwide kind of global scale um, pandemic, you know, since the early 20th century. And so all of us are just struggling to cope. And for many of us, that resulted in burnout, but it was unidentifiable for us as burnout because it didn't look like anything we'd ever seen.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And our society is a microwave society. We're a society that's not used to waiting.
Mhm.
Everything is about the instant gratification. And we're so used to moving and having our freedoms and just enjoying things. And so much of those little things that we've taken for granted
Mhm.
were taken away during 2020. It was like, wow, even for the couple that might have been having some problems, but they were able to avoid them because they both stayed busy at work. Now we're both working at home,
Mhm.
or for the busy mom,
Yeah.
who's already had so many challenges, now trying to figure out, how do I homeschool my
Yeah.
children? I mean,
Yeah.
the word adaptable is like, if you did not know how to adapt to the changes that happened in 2020, it just, wow, it made everything even more exacerbated. It just seemed like it was just bigger and larger than life. And so I think when burnout was happening, people were in denial because
Mhm.
they didn't even recognize the symptoms of, like, oh,
Yes.
like, wait, what is this? What
Yes.
am I going through right now? And it's like, oh, this is burnout. This is grief.
Mhm.
Talk about some of the symptoms. I mean, you mentioned them a little bit, even when you talked about losing your brother, which, oh my God,
Mhm.
my heart just went out to you when you said that. But being on the autopilot and what the expectations are when it comes to grief. We
Yeah.
expect grief to be quiet, we expect it to be brief, we expect for it to be private.
Mhm.
There's just these certain expectations that we have around grief. And it's really hard for people to recover from
Mhm.
grief and burnout.
Yeah, and I would add to that that for a lot of people, um, they were unwilling to acknowledge that what they were feeling was grief because we have this thing as Americans where we wanna look on the bright side. So it's, "I'm still employed, I can pay my bills, I'm not like these people, I haven't lost anyone in my immediate family yet." But we were dealing with anxiety and fear. We weren't able to see our grandparents, our parents maybe, you know, we weren't able to visit and, fellowship the way that we had with friends and loved ones. We lost big parts of who we were, people who were members of community of faith, older people, Maybe that's all they had. Their children and grandchildren live far away, and they look forward to going to the church to volunteer, going to prayer meeting, going to church every week and getting those hugs and getting that fellowship. People experienced huge losses,
Mm,
but they wanted to characterize them as something for which they should be grateful. And I think that when you fail to admit and acknowledge what you're going through,
yeah,
you cannot deal with it. So we're going to get to recovery, right? We're going to get there. But what I want to point out is that there are so many people who, even now, when we're on the tail end of the pandemic, they are looking back and they are counting their blessings. Hey, I didn't lose this person. I didn't lose this person. My job is employed. I'm fully vaccinated and I can visit now, but they're still feeling the anxiety, the tightness in their chest. Their sleep patterns or their eating patterns may still be disrupted. I'm talking symptoms now, right?
yeah,
They may still not be able to focus for long periods of time. They may still go into daydreams. They may still have mood swings that are uncontrollable. For me, you know, my children are very young. I at when the pandemic started, I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And trying to do online school with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I thank God for my husband. I'll tell you, I kept saying, "Well, I'm more fortunate than some people." My husband already worked from home. He already keeps kind of an erratic schedule, so he can handle the morning stuff when I have to be on Zoom calls and in meetings. But I wasn't acknowledging the mom guilt. I wasn't acknowledging, how upset it would make me feel when my kids are like knocking on my door. I want to go outside and play. I want to go here. The neighbors are outside. Can we go ride bikes? And I'm saying, no, I have to take this call, or no, I have to finish this email, or no, I have to get this filed. And it weighed me down. You know, Part of the concept of burnout involves different areas of your life colliding, and more than one of them is not going well. And that is what happened for so many people. Like, burnout generally doesn't typically happen in one area. I always talk about leading a life that's in balance. And that for me means health. It means your mental health, it means your physical health, it means your spiritual health, and it means your emotional health. And what that means is if any one of those pieces is out of balance, there may be multiple ways that it affects your entire life, but when you experience that burnout, what you can't do is try to justify it. What you can't do is try to say, at least I have this. You have to acknowledge your feelings, right? You got to sit in them, because if you can't acknowledge them, you're never going to be able to deal with them in a constructive way, address them, and get over them.
man, that was powerful. I mean, I was soaking up every morsel because, I mean, even when you talked about the symptoms of burnout are so similar to grief. you know, the distraction, the sleeplessness, all of these things. And we are constantly minimizing
Mhm.
whatever we're going through. It's like,
Yep.
oh, you and nobody wants to be the Debbie Downer. Nobody
Mhm.
wants to be the complainer. And I
Yep.
get it, especially as Christians, as people of faith. You don't want to be the person who's coming in, woe is me.
Mhm.
However, to not even acknowledge this is the stuff that I've been through.
Mhm.
And yes, I'm extremely grateful, but that I've made it through the other side. But have I even given myself permission to think about this major loss, to think about these major changes that I've had in my life? And I think that's it. Can you give yourself permission to process those emotions? So, what happens when we don't give ourselves permission? What happens when we never acknowledge? Talk about that. Talk about the person who's not acknowledging, they're not even giving themselves permission. And then now we get the ultimate blow. Something happens, and this person is a basket case there,
Mhm.
and they're wondering, well, why? Talk
Mhm.
about that person.
This happens all the time, and I'm gonna say this, and I know I'm gonna get blowback from it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. This happens all the time in the church because
Yes,
people don't want people in their business, and we
yes,
can talk about the culture, we can talk about why it is that people would wonder and worry about that when we're supposed to be a family, right?
yes.
But your family can talk about you the worst. They can, and they do. And a lot of times people will sit there and justify. You know, I have seen, even in situations far removed from a pandemic, people justifying toxic behavior in spouses, people justifying, you know, acting out in their children until you ignore it and it's going to blow up. I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but in my own family, we dealt with this. And what happened with my brother was a direct result of this.
Mhm.
A direct result of people refusing to put on their glasses, or rather take off their rose colored glasses and say, we have a problem and we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
People will lose their lives. It doesn't stop with being a basket case. Divorce, children out there unable to express their emotions properly. So they're acting out with drug use, with sexual promiscuity. When we're brave enough to
Yeah.
examine our own feelings, when we're brave enough to say, I'm not okay and I'm going to get help. And let me tell you what this means for you when I'm not okay. It means sometimes I'm not going to be happy.
Mm.
It means sometimes I'm going to be a little short. It means sometimes I'm not going to have the bandwidth to make dinner. So we're going to have breakfast for dinner. And it means saying that and normalizing it for our kids so that when they have those hard, heavy feelings, they're not afraid to tell us. They don't believe that it makes them weird or different. They don't feel like there's a stigma attached to dealing with pain, because grief and burnout are just the results of pain that has been untreated.
Yes.
Emotional pain, spiritual pain, for some people, physical pain. There are people who suffer from chronic diseases, lupus, fibromyalgia, and they have chronic pain. Even, I know some people who suffer from vertigo. And
Mhm.
and we think of these things in the abstract, but until you've experienced it, you don't understand. You lose your life.
Mhm.
And they want to say, I thank God it's not cancer. No, it's bad. You are hurting. It's affecting your life. You need to acknowledge your emotions around it so that you can find a way to work through those emotions. You can't keep pushing yourself to be normal, to present yourself as normal, to show up the way that you've always shown up for everyone in your life, because guess what? They will be left lost, dazed, confused, and emotionally stunted. I'm not going to say unable to process their emotions. They will be emotionally stunted when you drop dead, because you will.
Mhm.
And I know that this is harsh, but I need for Black women especially to understand that we are killing ourselves by not speaking the truth of our pain and dealing with it.
Well, girl, you spitting nuggets here. I'm just sitting here saying thank you. I mean, wow. Oh, wow. You so many things. It's like my head is spinning because I don't know which question to ask next. But we talked a little bit about how it shows up in the physical, how this burnout, this stress, when ignored, is now showing up in the physical body, because we know that the mind, body, spirit, they're all connected.
Mhm,
They're all connected. And so if there is trouble in the spirit,
mhm,
if there's some unrest, it's going to continue to show up. It's going to show up in the mental, in the physical, in the emotional. And it seems that when it does show up in the body or in the physical, now we begin to pay attention. But even in the paying attention, some of us still do not make the connection that, oh, maybe it could just be, you know, this burnout. Maybe it could be the stress. So Like I've been told that grief shows up in the lungs.
Yes.
Worry will
Yes.
affect the kidneys.
Yes.
Stress affects the brain and the heart.
Yes.
Certain organs that are affected more than others. You think about how many are dying of
Mhm.
the colon cancers, the pancreatic cancers, things that affect the gut because we have so much unrest and saying, "Oh, I'm fine. No, I'm okay. No, oh, I forgave that person. That's
Mhm.
over. That's in the
See?
past."
Speak it.
But something triggers it, and you're like, ah, and you're like, okay, maybe that's not in the sea of forgetfulness like you thought it was, and it's just a process
Mhm.
of constantly being self-aware and acknowledging this is where I am. How am I feeling right now? And
Yes.
this is all new language for us. We,
Yes.
we weren't taught to say, let me do a self check right now. Let me do an emotional check right now. Where am I
Yeah.
right now? You look like you want to say something.
Listen. Listen. I am agreeing with you. You brought up those cancers. I read a study that said stress and worry are worse on the body than smoking a pack a day for 20 years.
Yes,
20 years.
yes,
And how many aunties and friends, mothers and relatives and our own parents have we seen just out of the blue been diagnosed with cancer and they're dead in 6 weeks, 6 months,
yes,
a year? This
yes,
is the result of holding in.
yes,
This is the result of not nurturing yourself
yes.
because we're trained, right, as women to nurture other people. And so, like I was saying earlier, it's easy for us to show up for other people. It's sometimes it's easier to get up, paste on that social smile, and
Mm,
show up in the ways that we're expected to than it is to sit down with ourselves and
yeah.
say, why are you feeling this? And what can we do to fix it?
Mm,
And that's what I do because I think that people nod and smile and they don't understand what I mean when I say your life has to be in balance.
yes.
It's this grief and burnout are places that you get, and it's generally due to temporary circumstances. But when you start poking it, if you're not a person who has lived your life in balance, there's going to be pus. There's
Mm,
going to be festering wounds that have been closed up inside there. And there are people who know this. They know they haven't dealt with that childhood molestation. They know they have complicated feelings, right? Because this is their father who's died and he either didn't protect them, didn't believe them, or did that molestation or abuse or emotional abuse. So they're sad, but they're happy and they're conflicted because they never got justice.
yes.
And what I'm saying is when we are dealing with the powerful emotions that come as a result of burnout, we have to be willing to understand that it's not going to go away overnight.
Mm,
It's not. And grief is a process. There
mhm.
are people who have lost, like my godmother passed 3 years ago. And I still have her number in my phone. I know whoever has that number now thinks I'm crazy because I will just forget and just call, and on the first ring, I immediately hang up because I'm like, "What am I doing?" And this person keeps calling me back, and I have never once picked up the phone and told them why I'm calling that number, but I can't make myself delete it
Oh, yeah.
because I have voicemails saved from her, right? And I don't wanna delete it and then not see her name in the voicemail.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, you have to understand, I understand logically that
Yes.
she was in pain and that it was her time and that I'm gonna see her in the great beyond, but that doesn't stop the grief from coming when it comes. And the best thing that we can do, and the thing that I have been taught to do, because this doesn't come naturally, right? I went to therapy for this, is to sit in that grief and think about what it is that I needed from her that day and teach myself to be that for myself and for someone else.
Yes.
Because who she was to me is going to live on. And I can be sad and still have joy and peace, right?
Yes.
In the middle of the grief. But if you never get to that, you're going to be stuck in that anger, denial, and depressed stage of the grief cycle. And it's okay to get to those stages. I'm not saying it's not. But I'm saying that you can't expect, and a lot of people do, they want to cry at the funeral, throw themselves in the casket, and expect that they're never going to feel that way again after that day. But you will. If this is somebody who was a major part of your life, you're going to feel it for the rest of your life. That's going to happen with divorce.
Mm.
There are women and men who celebrate their divorces. They're so happy it's over. And yet they find themselves dating someone just who has the exact same issues as that spouse they left for those issues because they have not dealt with the true problem. And so they're still dealing with that grief and they're still looking to fill that person's void in their life. So grief and burnout are all related to living a life that's in balance.
Yes.
And for me, last year I hit a wall. I hit a wall. I I couldn't handle, it was around July, August, and I felt like I wasn't being a good wife, a good mother, a good employee. Like I I am literally completely safe from losing my job, and every day I was breathing into a paper bag thinking this is the day I'm going to get fired.
Mm.
And it wasn't a like my boss would tell me it's not a possibility because he would just sense my anxiety, and I didn't know why that was happening.
Mm.
And the truth was it didn't have anything to do with my job. Everyone was performing as they could during the pandemic. It had everything to do with the way I was feeling about myself and inside myself because of everything coalescing at the same time. I hadn't processed the loss of childcare, the loss of going into an office and being able to close my door and having my files and everything I need. I hadn't processed the loss of my community, and I hadn't processed the loss of my brother.
Mm.
I had not, because I'm constantly saying this is just too much for today. I'll deal with it tomorrow. And how many of us do that? We could do that for a decade on something real terrible. Like, oh, I can't think about this today. I'll deal with it tomorrow and just never go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, it's going to show up.
Yes.
And it's going to show up in the ways that hurt you more. It's not going to hurt other people as much as it hurts you, because it's going to show up in your relationships.
Yes.
You're going to lose relationships that matter. It's going to show up in your careers. Have you ever known those bitter, angry people who can't hold on to a job? And they seem nice, they're bitingly sarcastic and funny, but they cannot hold it together to keep a job
Yeah.
because they're constantly taking out what's going on the inside in places where it doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
We have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge it. And
Yeah.
we have to say, hey, it's enough is enough. I am going to sit down with myself. I'm going to feel my feelings. And you know what I'm also going to do? I am going to get help to deal with this loss, whether it's the loss of a job, a relationship, a parent, a spouse, a sibling. I'm going to go to therapy because you know, you are a grief coach. There are people who come to you who have never seen a therapist, probably.
Right.
And they're comfortable with you because you have the pastoral background in that presentation.
Mm-hmm.
You're a chaplain, but at the same time, they wouldn't go into a therapist office
Mm-hmm.
and seek the type of help that they probably need to process the pus, right? The festering wound that's underneath that little bump that we see on the surface. But the
Mm.
part that's on the inside is what's killing them.
Yes. Well, praise God. I mean, this is such a powerful conversation, and I tell you, we need another hour for this, but I know our time is almost up. I wanted to just talk, man, it was so many things that you said, but with that last comment, I thought about something that I believe it's Dr. Bruce, um, his name is, Dr. Bruce Perry says. And so many times when people are acting out, we say, "What is wrong with him?" Or "What is wrong with her?" When the question that we should really ask is, what happened to you?
Yes.
What happened? I mean, can you imagine if we gave people that invitation instead of just, from the beginning, what's wrong with you, making you seem broken and damaged you know, but we just gave you the invitation and invited you to sit down and say, what happened? Tell me what happened. That is just another way, I think, to be able to give a safe space, to hold a safe space where someone can share,
Mhm.
this is what I'm going through. When I think about as a child, 14, losing my father, and if somebody could just said to me, what happened? Tell me what it's like. What has it been like for you? Instead of giving me the what's wrong with you? Why is Sonia acting out in school? Why is she talking crazy? Making me feel even more damaged, more, displaced, and what's wrong with you?
Mhm.
That's just another way of approaching a conversation to help somebody that you love, and then encouraging them to, like you said, to seek out the therapy, seek out a professional that they can talk to. What are some of the other things that people can do for treatment? It may not be as severe as,
Mhm.
something really huge like divorce or death, but
Mhm.
just day to day, a self check or something that we can do to just help us with burnout.
Well, the first thing I want to do is you asked me the definition of burnout earlier, and I gave my definition, but there was a writer that wrote a book called Burn In, Burnout, and Workplace Grief Busting. And I can't remember his name. I think his name is Mark, but I don't remember his last name. And he says burnout is a gradual process.
Mm,
And he says a person detaches from work and other significant roles and relationships slowly. It doesn't happen overnight. But this is a response to prolonged stress, mental, physical, and emotional strain. And the result is that their productivity goes down, they become more cynical, they get a little confused, and they get drained to the point where they feel that they have nothing more to give. And I think the most important thing to take away from that is you feel yourself slowly. It's like a battery draining, right?
yeah,
If you've ever used your phone and you've started getting that alert 20%, 10%, 5%, you see it starts to load a little slower. Pages take a little bit more time. You feel the brain fog, so you know it's coming. What do? You can stop and you can just say, hey, I need to use some of my PTO.
mm,
But for so many of us, we think that we have to, like I said, we got to show up at 100% for everyone other than ourselves. Take that PTO.
yeah, that's right.
Take it. If you don't have a lot of money in the bank, go if you and you live in a house with other people, so a staycation at your house is not an option, go to the Holiday Inn and take things you love. Take
Yeah,
candles, take books, and take a journal. If you don't have a journal, take a notepad, take some paper and a pen. It doesn't matter. And just write what you think. Free form. Because you'll start writing and at first it will seem like you're forcing it. But as you start, your brain is going to kick on and your brain is going to tell you what you're really feeling. Just keep writing. If you're not a writer, if you don't like writing, open a voice note. I do this all the time because I'm with my kids and sometimes I'll be preparing dinner and I'll be feeling something and I'm like, okay, I can't, stop and write right now, but I'm going to turn on a voice note. And sometimes they'll be 10, 15, 20 minutes long, but there'll be one thing in there, one 45-second, 10-second thing that tells me what I need to focus on in this moment. And it may be calling someone I haven't spoken to in a long time. It may be praying for someone, or it may be that I need to go outside and take a walk. Because one of the things that suffers the most when we're experiencing burnout is self care. And people think self care is manicures, pedicures, chocolates, wine, whatever it is you're into. But self care is eating well, nourishing your body. Self care is taking a walk, moving your body, deep breathing, doing some yoga, taking a shower, putting on clean clothes every day. Self care means showing up for yourself the way that you show up for everyone else. And so, if you have not acknowledged that you're dealing with burnout or grief, I highly recommend self check ins, like you said, sitting down and writing. If you can't sit down and write, I use an app and I don't normally plug things, but this has been a lifesaver for me. It's the Calm app. And they
Yeah.
they have daily check-ins
Mhm.
and they ask you how you're feeling and they give you a bunch of categories and then you can pick what is stressing you that day. Is it work? Is it school? Is it relationships? Is it spirituality? Is it finances? And they even leave you a section for notes. And what I love about that is if you do those check ins every day, and if you start a practice by which you take some time, and I'm not going to tell you take 30 minutes or an hour, I don't know what your life looks like. You may have 5 minutes to say, how am I feeling right now? 5 minutes in the morning to get up and tell yourself what kind of day you're going to have, right? It doesn't matter if you're late. God is going to get me where I need to be on time, and this day will be blessed. And then you make sure that during the day, you're taking time to check in, you're standing up for yourself. You're setting boundaries around your time and your energy with other people. And if you can't do that, then I'm sorry, you do need to talk to a coach or a therapist.
Yeah.
And the last thing is doing your check ins every day
Yes.
because you're going to start seeing. I talk about developing a practice, and I know we're over time, so I'm going to end here. But it is very, very important to develop a practice that allows you to do the things that you love and the things that you need. If you're a pianist, if you write poetry, if you draw, if you skate, bike, you know, whatever it is you do, you need to find 10, 20, 30 minutes, an hour even. If you can do it every day, 3 times a week, you need to sit down with your schedule and find time for the things that you love and intentionally incorporate that into your life. And you need to do your check-ins and also acknowledge that if you're doing this and you still feel like you're a computer that is half dead, it's time to take a timeout. Adult timeouts are the best. And that goes back to that taking PTO. You may just, if you live by yourself, you may just need to close yourself in your apartment, but you may need to call up a girlfriend if you're an extrovert. See, I'm an introvert. My idea of restoration is quiet time by myself. Take that time and talk to yourself about what you need to get back to you.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. I love it. And, you know, so many people think that vacations are a luxury, but they're a necessity. They really are. I mean, people need to be intentional about their time off. And you'll see that in other cultures. They take their siesta, you know, they take time where they rest. And that is just imperative, I think, for great emotional,
Yes.
physical, mental health. So my takeaways, I thought I'd make them start out with R, and we're going to just have to have you come back where we focus just on recovery. So I was thinking for all of my R's here, I have rest, retreat, relax, restore, revive, repair, recover. I
Yes.
mean, those are the words that I think about when I say, what does recovery look like?
Mhm.
And that rest, even God Himself calls us to remember to rest,
Mhm.
take a break, and that's essential for the self check in. You know that was God saying, "This is your self check.
Yeah.
Today is a day. Check in with yourself. Check in with your family. Check in with your neighbor." So many of us, our day of worship has become the busiest days of our schedule,
Yeah.
and we need to change that and get back to what has He really called us to do. And I think the pandemic had us change things around where it was like, okay, is this really important? What's really important? Essential when it comes to me appreciating my rest? So This has been fantastic. Any final thoughts before we go? I want people to know how they can reach you. They can follow you on at the How To Chick. I just love this name, at the How To Chick, where you can follow Naomi. She has a podcast talking about so many subjects. Burnout is just one. Please support her channel. She has excellent content. She's a woman of integrity, a faith based woman, a woman who's just going to be truthful and just tell you how it is. This is what we need to do if you really want to recover and enjoy just a life full of abundance, a life full of blessings, a life full of joy.
Yeah.
And so many of us, we compare ourselves to others. And I realize that comparison is the thief of joy. So we'll have to talk about that next time when we're comparing ourselves and wondering, why does she have it all together and I don't? That's why I love it when you say you can do some things, but you just can't do everything.
No, that's exactly it. And, I hope this was helpful to someone. I really I hate that I didn't get to recovery, but just like grief and burnout look different for everyone, so does recovery.
Yes.
So, I am happy to come back and talk about that because my recovery took a long time. That would have been a whole podcast by itself.
It is a process. It is a process. It's not instant. You didn't get there instantly. And so it will take a process to get out of it, to change, those new thought patterns. We fall into our default behavior, and a lot of that has been unhealthy. So, yes, please come back. I hope that you'll come back soon where we can just focus on recovery.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And God bless everyone who is watching. Remember to go to at the How To Chick where you can follow Naomi. And then you can also follow me at Sonia M. Shockley. Please take time to go to my YouTube channel, The Sonia Shockley Show, and like and subscribe. Share this content with others. There are people who desperately need these messages of hope and inspiration. Have a fantastic day, and remember, I love you, and be intentional about turning your bitter into something better. Bye bye.